The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling me away from the half-read book I'd finally carved out time for. It was Laura, my daughter. I picked up, already knowing what it would be about. "Mom, you're a lifesaver. Seriously." Laura, who's 39 now, chirped into the receiver. "The sitter just cancelled, and Ethan's got that big presentation tomorrow, so he can't help with the kids. I know you had plans, but..." I looked at the invitation sitting on the table. A reunion lunch with some of my old nursing colleagues. We hadn't all been together in years. A pang of disappointment, sharp and familiar, went through me. But then I pictured my grandkids, 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Sam, their bright smiles. How could I say no? "Of course, honey," I said, my voice softening, pushing the thought of catching up with Maggie and the others to the back of my mind. "Don't worry about it. I'll be there in an hour." It was always like this. For as long as I could remember, my life had been a series of small sacrifices, each one made with love, each one feeling like the right thing to do for my children. I am Sylvia Carter, 68 years old, a retired nurse, and for decades, my identity had been wrapped up in nurturing, first my patients, then my family. I believed in being the foundation, the steady hand, the one they could always count on. I remembered the day Ethan, my eldest, came to me, all charm and big ideas, when he was 35. He wanted to start a tech company, something about apps and data. He'd laid out his business plan on my dining room table, his eyes bright with ambition. "Mom, just a co-signature," he'd pleaded. "It's a sure thing, I promise. The bank just needs a little extra security." I'd looked at my son, then 35, so full of potential, and signed the papers without a second thought. It was a substantial loan, enough to make me nervous, but his enthusiasm was infectious. I wanted to see him succeed. That was 7 years ago. Then there was Laura, 3 years later, when she was 35 and found her dream home. A little bungalow with a big backyard, perfect for future grandkids. She was so excited, but a few thousand short for the down payment. "Mom, you're the only one who can help," she'd said, her voice tight with desperation. "Just for a little while, until I get my bonus." Another signature? Another chunk of my savings? Another act of faith. That was 4 years ago. I didn't regret any of it. Not then. I saw my contributions as investments in their happiness, in their futures. I thought it fostered a bond, a deep sense of gratitude. They were my children, and I loved them fiercely. Last Sunday, we had one of our usual family dinners at my house. Ethan, now 42, Laura, 39, and Jason, my youngest, who's 35 and an artist, were all there. The table was laden with food I'd spent all day preparing. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, all their favorites. The conversation flowed easily, mostly about their lives, their jobs, their plans. "You know, I'm thinking of upgrading my car," Ethan announced, leaning back in his chair, a half smile playing on his lips. "This old thing is practically falling apart. Maybe a new SUV, something with more space." He glanced at me, a twinkle in his eye. "But those payments, oof. Good thing Mom will always save the day, right?" Laura and Jason chuckled. I felt a familiar warmth spread through me, mixed with a tiny, almost imperceptible prick of something else. A fleeting sadness. Pride, because they saw me as their rock, their dependable support. Sorrow, because it felt less like a choice and more like an expectation. I just smiled, a little too brightly perhaps. "You kids," I said, shaking my head good-naturedly. Later, as I was clearing the plates, I heard Laura's voice from the living room, a little too loud, a little too dismissive. "Honestly, Jason, Mom just doesn't get it. Her values are so old-fashioned. She thinks everything should be done the way it was in the 50s. Jason mumbled something in response, too low for me to catch, but Laura's words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I paused, a plate in my hand, feeling a chill despite the warmth of the kitchen. Old-fashioned? Was that how they saw me? Not as a loving mother, but as a relic? The warmth in my chest flickered, replaced by a growing unease. It was a subtle shift. A crack in the foundation I thought was so solid, but it was there, and it would only widen. The chill from Laura's words lingered, a subtle but persistent draft in the comfortable warmth of my home. It wasn't just that one comment, though. It was a pattern, slowly but surely weaving itself into the fabric of our family interactions. A few weeks after that dinner, we were all gathered again, this time at Ethan's house. He and his wife, Sarah, were talking animatedly about a new investment opportunity. Something about cryptocurrency that went completely over my head. I listened patiently, trying to follow along, and when there was a brief lull, I offered a thought. "You know, my father always used to say, if it sounds too good to be true." Ethan cut me off smoothly, a practiced smile on his face. "Mom, with all due respect, it's a different world now. Things move faster. It's not like the old days of bonds and savings accounts." He didn't even look at me, turning back to Sarah and continuing his explanation as if I hadn't spoken. Laura, sitting next to me, let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh and rolled her eyes, catching Jason's gaze across the room. Jason, ever the quiet observer, just shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I felt my cheeks flush, a familiar sting of being dismissed. I just nodded, pretending to be absorbed in the pattern of the rug. It wasn't just during conversations. It was the way they'd sometimes talk over me, or finish my sentences, or simply change the subject when I tried to share something from my day. My stories, my experiences, seemed to hold little interest for them anymore. I'd spent a lifetime listening to their every joy and worry, offering advice, celebrating their triumphs, comforting their disappointments. Now, it felt like I was speaking into a void. The most painful instance, though, happened a month later. It was Lily's birthday, my granddaughter. I'd been so excited, planning a special little gift, a handmade quilt I'd been working on for months. Laura had mentioned a party, but vaguely, saying she'd send details. I waited, but no invitation came. I called Laura a few days before the supposed date. "So, about Lily's party, honey? What time should I be there?" There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice laced with what sounded like forced cheerfulness. "We actually decided to keep it really small this year. Just a few of Lily's school friends and a couple of parents. We thought you'd probably find it a bit much, all that kid noise." My heart sank. "But I made her a quilt," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, that's so sweet, Mom. Just drop it off whenever. We'll tell her it's from you." She sounded rushed, already moving on. "Look, I gotta go. The kids are yelling. Talk soon." I hung up, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. I knew it wasn't just a few school friends. I'd seen the photos on Facebook later. Ethan and Sarah were there, all smiles, surrounded by a dozen other adults, including some of Laura's friends I recognized. There was a big bouncy castle in the backyard. My quilt, I imagined, was probably still in the bag I'd left on her porch. I hadn't even seen Lily open it. I felt invisible, not just forgotten, but actively, deliberately excluded. It was a cold, sharp ache that settled deep in my chest. Yet, even then, my first instinct wasn't anger. It was to find an excuse for them. They were busy. They were stressed. Maybe I would have found the noise too much. My mind, so accustomed to accommodating their whims, to finding the good in them, worked overtime to rationalize their behavior. It was easier to believe I was the one who misunderstood, the one who was being too sensitive. But the incidents kept accumulating. The way Ethan would casually ask if I could spot him for a new gadget, always promising to pay me back next month. A next month that rarely arrived. The way Jason, despite his artistic talent, seemed content to let me cover his rent for months at a time, always with a charming, apologetic shrug. The way Laura would drop off Lily and Sam without a definite pickup time, knowing I'd never complain. I started to feel a growing sense of unease. It was like a faint, discordant note in a melody I'd always thought was harmonious. The love was still there, of course, deep and unwavering. But it was overshadowed by a creeping suspicion. A quiet question that began to echo in the empty spaces of my home. Were they truly grateful, or had my sacrifices simply become their entitlements? The answer, I feared, was slowly revealing itself, and it was a truth I wasn't ready to face. The foundation I'd built, brick by loving brick, felt like it was starting to crumble, silently, beneath my feet. The unease that had been a quiet hum in the background of my life started to grow louder, a persistent thrumming that I tried to ignore. It had been a couple of months since Lily's birthday party, and the pattern of dismissiveness hadn't changed. I found myself bracing for it, almost expecting it whenever my children were around. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, the phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice brimming with an almost theatrical excitement. "Mom, you won't believe this. We've found an incredible last-minute deal. A family trip to Hawaii, all-inclusive, everything. It's too good to pass up." My heart did a little flutter. Hawaii. I hadn't been on a real vacation in years, not since Richard, my estranged husband, left when the children were young. I'd always dreamed of seeing those turquoise waters. "Oh, Ethan, that sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely thrilled. "It is." "But here's the thing," he continued, his tone shifting slightly. "It's a package deal, and to get this price, we need to book it all together, and quickly. The airline needs a co-signer for the group booking, just for the tickets. You know, to guarantee the numbers. With your excellent credit, Sylvia, it would make it so much easier. We'll handle all the actual payments, of course. Just your name on the booking form." He made it sound so simple, so logical, a mere formality. Laura and Jason got on the phone too, their voices echoing Ethan's enthusiasm. "Please, Mom, it'll be amazing. A real family adventure," Laura pleaded. Jason, usually so reserved, even chimed in, "Yeah, Mom, you deserve a break. It'll be fun." They painted such a vivid picture. Sandy beaches, warm sun, all of us together, laughing, making memories, the old dream of a united, loving family, The one I'd always held on to felt within reach. How could I say no to that? To the promise of finally being truly included, truly cherished. Of course, darlings, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Whatever you need, just tell me where to sign. They handled everything from there. Don't you worry your head about the details, Mom, Ethan had assured me. We'll sort the tickets, get all the confirmations. You just pack your bags and get ready for paradise. I remember the rush of excitement, the giddy feeling of anticipation. I started looking up Hawaiian flowers, thinking about what clothes to pack. I was oblivious, completely blind to their ulterior motives, trusting them implicitly. The day of the flight arrived a few weeks later. I was up before dawn, my small suitcase packed with my brightest summer clothes. Ethan picked me up, Laura and Jason already in the car. The air in the car felt heavy, tense almost. Ethan was unusually quiet, his usual boisterous charm replaced by a focused, almost grim silence as he navigated the morning traffic. Laura kept fiddling with her phone, avoiding my gaze in the rearview mirror. Jason, in the back with me, stared out the window, his artist's hands clasped tightly in his lap. I tried to make conversation. Are you excited, Jason? I hear the art scene in Hawaii is quite vibrant. He offered a weak smile. Yeah, Mom, sounds good. A knot began to form in my stomach. It wasn't the usual pre-travel jitters. This was something else. A cold, creeping sensation, like a shadow passing over the sun. I tried to shake it off. Don't be silly, Sylvia, I told myself. They're just stressed with the travel. It's early. My mind, ever the loyal defender of my children, worked tirelessly to construct plausible explanations for their strange behavior. They loved me. They wouldn't betray me. Not after everything. Not after all the years. All the sacrifices. We pulled up to the departures terminal. Okay, Mom, Ethan said, pulling into a short-term parking spot. You head inside. Check your bag. We just need to double-check something with the airline desk about the group booking. We'll meet you at the gate, okay? Oh, can't I come with you? I asked, a flicker of unease turning into a definite prickle. I'd like to make sure everything's in order with my ticket. Laura quickly interjected. No, Mom, it's fine. It'll be faster if we just go. You know how long those lines can be. We'll be right behind you. She gave me a quick, almost too bright smile. I hesitated, but their insistence was firm. All right then, I said, grabbing my small suitcase. I'll see you at the gate. I watched them drive away, a strange hollow feeling in my chest. The airport was bustling, a symphony of hurried footsteps and disembodied announcements. I found the check-in counter, handed over my ID, and waited. The agent scanned my passport, her brow furrowing slightly. She typed for a moment, then looked up, a polite but apologetic expression on her face. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, but there's no booking under your name for this flight. Are you sure you have the correct flight number? My blood ran cold. But my children, I stammered. They booked it. A group booking. My name is on it. She typed again, then shook her head. I'm afraid not. There's a group booking under Ethan's name, but your name, Sylvia, is not listed as a passenger. Only Ethan, Laura, and Jason, and their respective families. The words hit me like a physical blow. The bustling airport sounds faded, replaced by a deafening roar in my ears. I stood there, clutching my suitcase, the terminal lights suddenly too bright. the air too thin. The trap, so subtly set, had sprung, and I was caught, utterly alone. The words from the airline agent echoed in the cavernous terminal, bouncing off the high ceilings and the glass walls, yet seeming to land only in the hollow space inside my chest. No booking under your name. Not listed as a passenger. My mind struggled to process it, to reconcile the polite, apologetic voice with the brutal reality it conveyed. I must have stood there for a long moment, my small suitcase still clutched in my hand. The bustling airport a blur around me. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling. It was a text from Ethan. "Hey Mom, quick change of plans. We decided to head straight to the gate. Security lines were crazy. We're boarding now. See you in Hawaii." See you in Hawaii. The words, so casual, so dismissive, hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just leaving me. They were telling. Well, they were leaving as if it were a minor inconvenience. A slight alteration to the itinerary. The cold realization washed over me. A tidal wave of betrayal that left me gasping for air. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. My hands trembled as I dialed Ethan's number. It rang once, twice, then his voicemail. "Hey, it's Ethan, leave a message." I hung up, my heart pounding. I tried Laura, the same, then Jason. His phone just rang and rang. Panic began to set in, a cold claw gripping my throat. I tried Ethan again, my voice trembling as I left a message. "Ethan, what's going on? The agent said I don't have a ticket. Where are you? Why aren't you answering?" I could hear the desperation in my own voice, the pleading, and it shamed me even as I spoke. Minutes later, my phone rang. It was Laura. I snatched it up. "Laura, what is happening? I'm at the counter. They say I don't have a ticket." There was a pause, then her voice sounding distant and tinny, laced with a forced lightness. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. It was also last minute. A mix-up with the group booking. We tried to call you, but you must have been in security." "No, you didn't," I cried, my voice cracking. "I just spoke to the agent. My name isn't on any list. You left me here." Then I heard it. A faint, unmistakable sound in the background. Laughter. Ethan's laugh, distinct and booming, followed by Sarah's giggle. And then a muffled voice, possibly Jason's, saying something I couldn't quite make out. But the tone was light, carefree. They were together. They were laughing. Without me. "Mom, please, don't make a scene," Laura said, her voice dropping, a hint of annoyance creeping in. "It's just a misunderstanding. We'll sort it out when we get back. You can just reschedule, right? We'll call you from Hawaii." Reschedule? The word was a bitter taste in my mouth. "You co-signed my name on a loan for your tickets, and you expect me to just reschedule?" "Look, Mom, I really have to go. They're telling us to turn off our phones. We'll talk later, okay? Love you." And then, a click. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The "love you." The words felt like a cruel joke. My children, the ones I had poured my entire life into, had abandoned me. Not just abandoned, but actively betrayed me, using my good name and my trust to facilitate their own escape. I found an empty metal bench near a deserted gate and sank onto it. The cold, hard surface was a stark contrast to the warmth I had always tried to provide for them. The soft comfort of my home, my arms, my unwavering support. I looked around at the strangers hurrying past, their faces intent on their own journeys. No one noticed me. No one cared. I was just an old woman, alone in a bustling airport, a forgotten piece of luggage. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging. But I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. The humiliation was too great. The pain was immense, a gaping wound in my heart. But beneath it, something else began to stir. A flicker of anger, cold and steady, a spark of indignation. I thought of the countless nights I'd spent rocking my grandchildren, the money I'd loaned without question, the endless patience I'd offered. And for what? To be discarded like this? To be a means to an end? No, not anymore. The Sylvia who had always accommodated, always understood, always sacrificed, was gone. Or perhaps she was simply buried, waiting for this moment to re-emerge. I took a deep, shaky breath, the metallic tang of the airport air filling my lungs. My dignity, my independence. They had taken so much, but they would not take that. This was not the end of my story. This was the beginning of a different one. I would reclaim what was mine. I would make them face what they had done. The airport receded behind me, a monument to my humiliation. I didn't remember the drive home, only the cold, empty silence that greeted me when I unlocked my front door. My small suitcase, still clutched in my hand, felt ridiculously heavy. I dropped it by the entrance, the soft thud echoing in the quiet house. The silence was deafening. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I usually cherished. It was a hollow, mocking silence, filled with the echoes of their laughter from Laura's phone call. I walked through the living room, past the armchair, where I'd rocked Lily and Sam countless times, past the dining table where we'd shared so many meals. Every object seemed to hum with memories, each one now tainted by the bitter taste of betrayal. I sank onto the sofa, the anger from the airport still simmering, but now it was joined by a profound, aching sorrow. How could they? How could my own children, the ones I had nurtured and protected, do this to me? The tears I had held back at the airport finally came, hot and relentless, streaming down my face. I cried until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw. A lifetime of suppressed disappointment and unacknowledged sacrifice finally breaking free. When the tears finally subsided, leaving me drained but strangely clear-headed, I found myself drawn to my old journal. It was a dusty leather-bound book, usually reserved for reflections on nature or quiet moments of gratitude. Tonight, it became a confessional. I wrote, my hand shaking at first, then gaining strength, pouring out every detail of the last few hours, every sting of their words, every memory of their casual dismissiveness. It was a raw, cathartic release, each word chiseling away at the emotional scars that had festered for so long. I wrote about Ethan's charm, Laura's pleas, Jason's quiet agreement, and how I had always believed in their love. The next few days were a blur of quiet solitude. I went through the motions, but everything felt different. The house, once a haven, now felt like a cage of memories. I started small. Instead of cooking a meal that could feed an army, as was my habit, I made a single serving of pasta, just for me. I ate it slowly, savoring each bite, not rushing, not thinking about anyone else's preferences. It was a tiny act, but it felt monumental. One sunny morning, I walked out to my small backyard. The flower beds, usually meticulously tended, had been neglected lately. I knelt down, feeling the cool earth beneath my fingers, and started pulling weeds. It was hard work, but the rhythmic motion was soothing. As I worked, I thought about the little acts of care I had always given, the way I had nurtured my family, just as I nurtured these plants. But unlike the garden, my family had taken without giving back, their roots growing deep into my resources, leaving me barren. I planted a few new marigolds, their vibrant orange a defiant splash of color against the green. It was a small act of hope, a promise to myself that I could still cultivate beauty, even if it was just for me. A few days later, needing a change of scenery and a decent cup of coffee, I ventured out to my local cafe. The Daily Grind. It was a cozy spot, usually bustling, but today it was quieter. I ordered a latte and found a table by the window. As I sipped my coffee, a woman at the next table, a few years older than me with kind, intelligent eyes, caught my gaze and offered a gentle smile. "Rough morning?" she asked, her voice soft. I must have looked as weary as I felt. I managed a weak smile in return. Something like that. "I know that look," she said, taking a sip of her tea. "I'm Maggie, and you look like you've been through the ringer." Something about her genuine warmth disarmed me. "Sylvia," I replied. And yes, you could say that. We fell into conversation easily, talking about the weather, the local news. Then, almost without thinking, I found myself telling her about the Hawaii trip, the airport, the text message. As I spoke, the raw pain resurfaced, but this time, it felt different, shared. Maggie listened patiently, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. "Oh, Sylvia, I'm so sorry. That's a terrible betrayal." She paused, then took a deep breath. "You know, something similar happened to me. Years ago, not a trip, but my own children, my daughter especially, used my savings, my retirement, for their own ventures, said it was an investment. I lost everything. For years I blamed myself. I thought I was a bad mother for not seeing it, for being so foolish." "You too," I whispered, a wave of understanding washing over me. "Yes," she nodded. "It took me a long time to realize it wasn't my fault. It was manipulation. They preyed on my love, my trust. I was a family therapist for 30 years before I retired. I saw it in others, but I couldn't see it in my own home." She leaned forward, her gaze firm. "What they did to you, Sylvia, it wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated act, and you deserve so much more than that." Her words, delivered with such quiet conviction, resonated deep within me. Manipulation, calculated. The terms felt harsh, but undeniably true. It wasn't just my old-fashioned values or my being too sensitive. It was a pattern, a deliberate exploitation, a flicker of resolve stronger than any I'd felt before, ignited within me. Maggie's story, her understanding, had given me a name for the insidious feeling that had been gnawing at me. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was clarity. And with clarity came power. Maggie's words, sharp and clear, had cut through the fog of my grief. Manipulation, calculated. They echoed in my mind, a stark contrast to the excuses I'd always made for my children. Her own story of betrayal, so similar to mine, had given me a sense of validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. I wasn't just a foolish old woman. I was a victim of a calculated act. And Maggie, with her quiet strength and practical advice, had shown me a path forward. The very next morning, I called the law office Maggie had recommended. You need someone who understands these things, Sylvia, she'd said, someone who won't let them walk all over you. The receptionist was kind, fitting me in for an appointment that afternoon. Walking into Mr. Henderson's office felt like stepping into a different world. It was quiet, professional, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Mr. Henderson, a man with a calm demeanor and sharp, intelligent eyes, listened patiently as I recounted the story, from the co-signed loans to the airport abandonment. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He simply took notes. "Sylvia," he began, after I had finished, "what your children have done is deeply unethical and potentially illegal in some aspects, particularly regarding the co-signed loans. When you co-sign, you become equally responsible for that debt. If they default, the bank will come after you." He explained the intricacies of the loans I had co-signed for Ethan's startup and Laura's home. He detailed the potential financial ruin I faced if they decided to simply walk away from their obligations. My children's dependence, which I'd always seen as a sign of their trust and need for me, was now revealed as a double-edged sword poised to cut me deeply. The initial thrill of helping them build their futures now felt like a naive gamble with my own security. "Do you have copies of all the loan documents?" he asked. "Any agreements, even informal ones, regarding repayment, bank statements showing transfers or payments you've made on their behalf?" I left his office with a heavy heart but a clear purpose. The vague unease had solidified into a concrete understanding of the danger I was in. I spent the rest of the day in my study, pulling out old files, rifling through drawers, and sifting through years of paperwork. Each document I found was a stark reminder of my sacrifices. My hands shook as I pulled out the original loan agreement for Ethan's startup. His bold signature next to mine, the large sum staring back at me. I remembered his bright eyes, his confident promises. 7 years ago, then Laura's mortgage papers, the amount for the down payment clearly marked, matched by a withdrawal from my savings account. 4 years ago, there were also smaller, less formal records. Bank transfer receipts for Jason's rent, credit card statements showing purchases I'd made for them, even old check stubs from when I'd paid for their car repairs or medical bills. Each piece of paper was a physical manifestation of my love, my trust, and now, my vulnerability. The sheer magnitude of my financial contributions, laid out in black and white, was staggering. It wasn't just a few favors. It was a significant portion of my life savings, my retirement nest egg, all tied up in their ambitions and comforts. A wave of nausea washed over me. How could I have been so blind, so willing to give, without ever truly questioning the cost to myself? As I organized the documents into a neat pile, I noticed my hands had stopped trembling. A quiet resolve began to replace the fear. The more evidence I gathered, the clearer the picture became, and the more my indignation grew. I had another appointment a few days later, this time at my bank, to request detailed statements and transaction histories. The bank manager, a young woman named Miss Jen, treated me with utmost respect. She listened attentively, offered clear explanations, and processed my requests efficiently. There was no condescension, no eye-rolling, no casual dismissal. It was a stark contrast to the way my own children had been treating me for years. It was a small thing, but it made me realize how starved I had been for simple respect. These professionals, strangers, saw me as a person worthy of their time and expertise, not just a convenient resource. That evening, after another long day of gathering evidence and processing emotions, I found myself standing in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. My reflection stared back at me. A woman with tired eyes, lines etched around her mouth, but also a new glint of determination. "Sylvia," I whispered, my voice a little hoarse. "You're not just mom. You're not just a bank. You're worthy, you're strong, and you deserve respect." I looked at my reflection, really looked at it, seeing past the years of self-sacrifice and into the core of the woman I was. The former nurse, the caregiver, the one who had always put others first. But now, something had shifted. The quiet strength that had always been there, buried under layers of duty and expectation, was finally rising to the surface. The power was within me, waiting to be unleashed. I was ready. Ready to take action. Ready to reclaim my life. I started the week with a renewed sense of purpose. The clarity Maggie and Mr. Henderson had given me was a powerful shield against the lingering hurt. It was time to act. My first step was back to Mr. Henderson's office. "I want to make some changes to my will," I told him, my voice steady. "And I need to ensure my financial affairs are fully under my control." He nodded, understanding. We discussed the details. My existing will, drafted years ago, had left everything equally to my 3 children. Now, I wanted to revise it, to reflect the profound shift in our relationship. It wasn't about spite, I realized, but about protecting myself and ensuring my assets would be used responsibly, perhaps even for causes I believed in, rather than simply fueling their entitlement. We also discussed my bank accounts. While I couldn't unilaterally remove myself from the co-signed loans, those were legal obligations I was still bound by. I could ensure no further funds flowed from my personal accounts to theirs. I revoked any informal arrangements, changed my online banking passwords, and set up alerts for any unusual activity. Mr. Henderson also drafted formal letters to Ethan and Laura, reminding them of their sole responsibility for the loans I had co-signed and stating my intention to pursue legal recourse if they defaulted. This was a crucial step, establishing a clear legal boundary. The silence from my children had been deafening since the airport. Not a single call, not a single apology. They were in Hawaii, enjoying the trip I had, in essence, paid for. But that silence was about to be broken. It started subtly. A few days after my meeting with Mr. Henderson, I noticed Ethan's usual weekly request for a small transfer hadn't come through. Then Laura called, her tone unusually sharp. "Mom, I tried to access the emergency fund you set up for the grandkids, and it's gone. What happened?" "It's not an emergency fund for the grandkids, Laura," I corrected, my voice calm. "It's my savings account, and I've made some changes to my financial arrangements." "Changes? What changes?" Her voice rose, tinged with panic. "Mom, I needed that. I had a payment due." "That's your responsibility, Laura," I said, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. "Not mine." The phone call ended abruptly. I knew this was just the beginning. 2 days later, they showed up at my house. All 3 of them, Ethan, Laura, and even Jason, looking uncomfortable. They hadn't called first. Ethan, ever the leader, walked in, his usual charming smile replaced by a tight, angry frown. "Mom, What is going on? He demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. My bank just called me about the startup loan. They said you sent them a letter? What kind of stunt is this? Laura stood beside him, her arms crossed, her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and something that looked like fear. And my account. Mom, you can't just cut me off like that. I'm your daughter. Jason hovered a little behind them, his gaze fixed on the floor. He looked pale, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. I met Ethan's gaze, refusing to flinch. It's not a stunt, Ethan. It's called taking control of my own finances. Your loan, Laura's mortgage, those are your responsibilities. I co-signed, yes, but I am not your personal bank, and I'm no longer willing to enable your choices. Enable our choices? Ethan scoffed, running a hand through his hair. Mom, we're your family. We're just asking for a little help, like you always do. You're being completely unreasonable. Unreasonable? I felt a surge of strength. Is it unreasonable to expect my children to honor their own debts? Is it unreasonable to expect to be treated with respect? To not be abandoned at an airport while you fly off to Hawaii on tickets I co-signed? Laura stepped forward, her voice softening, trying a different tactic. Mom, please, we made a mistake with the trip. We admit that. But you know we love you. We were just so excited, and it was a last-minute deal. We thought you'd understand. Don't do this to us. Think about Lily and Sam. What will they do without their grandmother's help? Her words, once so potent, now felt hollow. The guilt trip, the emotional manipulation, it was also transparent. I looked at her, then at Ethan, then at Jason, who finally met my gaze, a flicker of shame in his eyes. I have thought about Lily and Sam, I said, my voice firm, and I've thought about myself. For years, I put your needs, your wants, above my own. I sacrificed my time, my money, my peace of mind, and for what? To be taken for granted. To be dismissed as old-fashioned? Ethan tried again, his voice now laced with a thinly veiled threat. Mom, if you go through with this, it's going to cause a lot of problems. For all of us. You don't want to hurt your family, do you? You hurt me, I said, the words cutting through the air. You hurt me deeply, and I'm done being hurt. I'm done being your safety net. I'm done being your ATM. My decisions are final. You are adults. It's time you started acting like it. A profound silence fell over the room. Ethan's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. Laura looked on the verge of tears, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. Jason, however, looked away again, his shoulders slumped. As they finally turned and walked out, leaving my house in a tense, angry silence, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, but beneath it, a powerful sense of relief, a deep, quiet strength. The confrontation had been difficult, painful even, but I had stood my ground. I had asserted my independence, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly in control of my own life. The autumn leaves had long since fallen, and now the first buds of spring were tentatively unfurling on the trees outside my new apartment window. It had been nearly 8 months since I stood my ground against Ethan, Laura, and Jason. 8 months since I watched them storm out of my house, leaving behind a silence that, for the first time, felt like freedom rather than emptiness. I had found this cozy apartment across town a few weeks after that confrontation. It was smaller than my old house, but it felt entirely mine. No ghosts of past sacrifices lingered in these sunlit rooms. I'd filled it with mementos that truly brought me joy. A few cherished photographs, a comfortable reading chair, the vibrant marigolds I'd planted in a pot on my small balcony. Every decision, from the color of the throw pillows to the arrangement of my books, was solely my own. It was a fresh start, curated by me, for me. My days were no longer dictated by anyone else's schedule. I joined a book club at the local library, started taking a weekly pottery class, and spent long, leisurely afternoons walking through the botanical gardens. Maggie, my wise friend from the cafe, became a constant presence in my life. We shared meals, went to art exhibits, and talked for hours, her dry wit and unwavering support a balm to my soul. I also found warmth and camaraderie with my new neighbors, Mrs. Henderson, a delightful woman who loved to garden, and Tom, a retired teacher who shared my passion for classic films. These were chosen relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not obligation. The children, predictably, had not taken my new boundaries well. The initial panic and anger had given way to a strained silence, punctuated by occasional terse text messages from Laura, usually about something she needed help with, which I politely but firmly declined. I hadn't seen Lily or Sam since the day I babysat them, canceling my reunion lunch. The ache of that absence was a dull throb, but I knew it was a consequence of their parents' choices, not mine. Maggie was often my source of news, gleaned through various community channels. She was a retired accountant, still connected to many people in town. Heard Ethan's startup is really struggling, Sylvia, she'd mentioned one afternoon over tea. Lost a big investor. Seems like he's having trouble making those loan payments on his own. A few weeks later, she told me that Laura and her husband were considering selling their house, the one I'd helped with the down payment for, due to financial difficulties. And Jason, Maggie heard, had moved back into a cramped studio apartment, no longer able to afford his previous place. I felt a complex mix of emotions when I heard these things. There was a pang of sadness, of course. They were still my children, and I didn't wish them ill. But there was also a quiet, undeniable sense of relief. They were facing the consequences of their actions, learning lessons I could never have taught them while I was their safety net. Their strained relationships with each other, too, were evident. Maggie reported hushed arguments and accusations among them, a family foundation crumbling under the weight of their own making. Then, about 6 months after I moved, an unexpected letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the name on the return address made my heart skip a beat. Richard, my estranged husband, after all these years. He wanted to reconnect, to explain things. He had heard about the family drama he wrote, and felt it was time. I showed the letter to Maggie. "What do you think?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. She looked at me, her eyes kind. "What do you think, Sylvia? This is your life now. You get to decide who's in it." I thought about Richard, the man who had walked out on me and our young children, leaving me to shoulder everything alone. His reappearance now, when the family was in turmoil, felt opportunistic. It was another test of my boundaries, another challenge to my newfound peace. I wrote a polite but firm reply, stating that while I wished him well, I had moved on and was not interested in revisiting the past. The letter, once sent, felt like another brick in the wall of my independence, solidifying the boundaries I was building around myself. It was a quiet closure, not just for me, but for the unresolved issues that had silently shadowed my children's lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I sat on my balcony, a cup of herbal tea warming my hands. The city hummed softly below, a gentle, comforting sound. I thought about the long journey I had taken, from the devoted, sacrificing mother to the woman I was today. The betrayal had been a painful crucible, but it had forged something new within me. Strength, clarity, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. My family ties were fractured, yes. The love I had given so freely had been taken for granted, leading to a profound loss. But in that loss, I had found myself. I had learned that love, true love, required respect and boundaries. And while the road to reconciliation for my children would be long, if it ever happened, my own path was clear. I was at peace. The sunset, a vibrant promise of a new day, reflected in my eyes, a symbol of hope and renewal. My life finally was my own.